This is a true scary story of an absolute nightmare of a betrayal by my beloved wife. Let me explain. As an actor struggling for steady work, I never expected a simple dishwasher repair job to turn into a fight for my life. My name is Mark, and I'm an actor. You probably haven't seen anything I've been in, despite all the auditions I've attended. Steady work has been scarce for me. My wife Gretchen works at a bank, and I take on part-time jobs at a coffee shop to contribute financially when I'm not pursuing acting. I also help around the house to ease Gretchen's burden as the main breadwinner. One day Gretchen suggested I take on side gigs to supplement our income. Unsure of where to start, she advised me to check online for nearby opportunities, as I am skilled in construction and renovation. I searched Craigslist and quickly found a post from a man named Jonathan. He lived close by and needed help fixing his dishwasher door. Confident I could handle the task, I emailed him. After exchanging a few messages, I agreed to go to his place that afternoon. Jonathan seemed nice when I arrived. He led me to his kitchen, which was far nicer than ours, indicating he was well off. The only thing out of place was his old broken dishwasher door. As I inspected the damage, Jonathan poured me a glass of lemonade. When I asked what caused the damage, he casually said it was just old. However, I could tell he was lying. The door had scratches and yanked out screws suggesting deliberate damage. Suspicious, I decided not to drink the lemonade, pretending to take a sip. I kept my lips shut. I then asked Jonathan for a towel, and while he fetched it, I discreetly poured the lemonade down the sink. When he returned, I acted as though I had finished the drink. He smiled and told me to take my time before leaving the room. Although fearful, I wasn't certain Jonathan had tried to poison me, with him out of sight. I quickly fixed the dishwasher door, which took about 10 minutes. Just as I was about to leave, Jonathan appeared behind me commenting that I looked woozy. His expectation of my reaction confirmed my suspicions. To ensure my safe exit, I pretended to feel dizzy and stumbled slightly. Jonathan suggested I sit while he got my payment and guided me toward the living room where I noticed a rope on the table. Sensing his plan to tie me up, I insisted on immediate payment via Venmo, saying I needed to get home. Ignoring his protests, I hurried to the door and opened it only to find Gretchen standing there, and without a word she entered, forcing me to step back. Confused, I asked what was happening. She placed a hand on my chest before shoving me onto the couch. Turning to Jonathan, she inquired if I had drunk everything. He confirmed, amazed I was still standing. They both looked at me, and Jonathan explained that Gretchen needed a real man in her life, implying their plan to get rid of me. Gretchen pulled a knife from her purse, advancing towards me. Jonathan grabbed my arm, attempting to tie me up, but I kicked him hard, causing him to stumble into Gretchen, causing her to accidentally stab him, and as Jonathan screamed in pain, I fled the house. I drove to a busy street and called the police, who instructed me to come to the station and give a statement, and they warned me not to return to Jonathan's house. Within an hour, the police found evidence supporting my story at Jonathan's house, including traces of sleeping medicine in the glass and the bloody knife. However, they couldn't locate Jonathan or Gretchen. It's been 3 weeks, and I'm still waiting for the police to find them. They're still on the run. I couldn't believe my life flashed before my eyes. I could be dead right now if I had finished that drink. I never heard from or saw my wife again. What kind of person tries to eliminate their spouse? Was it over money, or was it just because she didn't love me anymore? Was it worth trying to take my life? Before we get into this next story, I want to take a moment to talk about the sponsor for today's video. Aura is an all-in-one digital security service providing continuous monitoring of your personal data, along with quick resolutions to help you resolve any potential threats. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives. It's all out there. This affects nearly 1/3 of all U.S. citizens, and continues to affect 15 million U.S. citizens every single year, costing billions of dollars. That's why I've been using Aura. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. I don't know if you saw this, but AT&T revealed that over 73 million customer records, both existing and former customers, were released on the dark web. They recommend those affected use strong passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Well, Aura does all this for me, and Best of all, I don't have to download several different apps just because a company couldn't keep my data secure. If my info was compromised in the AT&T data breach, I wouldn't worry, because Aura is always on, always doing the hard work of keeping me safe. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to https://aura.com/thecurse to start your 2-week free trial, also linked below in the description. I strongly suggest everyone to try it out and keep your identity secure. Don't get cursed. Use Aura and save yourself. Get under your covers for this next frightening horror story, because this one is beyond creepy. This story took place back in the summer of 2021. During that time, I just recently got a brand new car. Before that, I had been driving an old 2004 Chevy Trailblazer, which, if you don't know, is an SUV. I didn't think it would be worth much, but I still decided to sell it on Craigslist. After all, that's where I had bought it years earlier, and I had taken really good care of it for the most part. I took some pictures out of my driveway and then listed the car. It ran pretty well and was very reliable, so I knew somebody would be interested. I listed it for $2,000 and waited. I wasn't in a rush to sell it, and it took about 2 days before I got the first response to the AD. The response was from someone asking if the car was still for sale. I said yes, and they texted back, asking if they could take a look at it. We then arranged a meeting after the person got off work the following day. I asked for their name, and he said his name was Barry. He said that he got off work at 8 p.m. I suggested that we meet in the parking lot of a nearby grocery store, because there was a really big parking lot. It would also be in a public area, because I didn't want a random person showing up at my house. Barry agreed, and the next day I drove out to the store, which was like 5 minutes away from my house. I got there early and looked around the parking lot. I told him that I was in the very back corner and you really couldn't miss me. The parking lot was always empty in the back half or so. It was often used for truckers or sometimes even fifth-wheel campers to park overnight. The first red flag happened before Barry even showed up. He texted me, saying that he was there and asking what my car looked like. I thought, seriously, you're the one interested in buying the car, and you don't even remember what it looks like. I gave him a description: gray SUV in the back corner. He then replied, saying that he saw me and was driving over. I looked around and watched a much newer-looking car approach me. It looked to be a red Ford Focus that was only a few years old. He parked right next to me, and I watched a man get out. He was younger, looking maybe 30, with dark brown hair and black glasses. I got out of my car and walked over to him. We met out front of my car and shook hands. I told him some basic information about the car as he looked at it. Less than a minute in, he asked me if we could go for a test drive. I said yes, and Barry got into the driver's seat of my car, and I got into the passenger seat. I noticed that he was on his phone a lot in the short time since he had gotten out of his car. Something just seemed a little bit strange about this guy. When he started driving, I asked him if he knew this area and if he could drive on some roads close by. He said that he knew it well, and we left the grocery store and headed to a quieter area. Barry went down a road that I had only been on a couple of times. It was a somewhat quiet road with a speed limit of 35. There were some patches of woods here and there, and some buildings that seemed to be industrial. During the drive, things were pretty quiet. I talked about the car for the first couple of minutes, but Barry didn't really respond or say anything back to me. I remember him looking at his phone once while driving, and I told him that he shouldn't do that. He was like, "Oh, sorry." And then he put it away. I asked him how he thought the car was driving and if he liked it. He just said, yes, it was good. After maybe 5 minutes of driving, I was starting to think that we should head back. That's when Barry suddenly began slowing down. He then pulled off the road and into this really crappy-looking abandoned parking lot. There were all kinds of woods on both sides leading into it, and the parking lot had tons of potholes and looked to be for a warehouse. When he got into the parking lot, he drove in a little ways and then stopped the car. I noticed that there was one other car in this parking lot. I thought at first maybe Barry just wanted to turn around in there, but when he stopped the car, I was really confused. Barry then shut off the engine and took the key out of the ignition. Then he opened up his driver's door and started to get out. I was really confused and just watching him, wondering what was going on as he was getting out. He then suddenly yelled at me to get out of the car. I looked to my right and saw 3 men getting out of the other vehicle that was also in the parking lot. and the three men were walking towards us. They were maybe 50 feet away. These men started walking at a fast pace, and Barry stepped out in front of my car and then waved at me to get out. I heard him yell at me to get out of the car again. I knew that I was in trouble at that point, and I didn't know what these guys wanted, but I realized something quickly. My car had 2 keys for it, and I had brought the spare just in case I would have sold it that night. It was in my pocket. After Barry saw that I was not getting out of the car, he started walking over to my passenger's door. I figured that he was going to try to force me out. Meanwhile, the other 3 men were now only about 20 feet away. I reached in my pocket and felt for the lock button for the doors. I pushed it, and when Barry got closer, I moved over into the driver's seat of the car. He reached the door and tried opening it, but it was locked. In that moment, I quickly put my spare key into the ignition and started the engine. Barry had the other key still and would be able to unlock it if he got it. When the car started, I saw him reaching into his pocket and saw the other men start running. As soon as the car was started up, though, I put it in drive and slammed my foot on the gas. The car jerked away from everyone, and they gave chase on foot for a short time before I sped away. I then made a quick U-turn as the men were now running for their vehicle. I drove out of that pothole-filled parking lot as fast as I could, and then back onto the road. I took the very first turn that I saw from that road, and the men were not able to reach me in their car on time. I didn't see them behind me and was able to get away. I went straight back to my house, and when I made it back home, I called the police and reported the whole thing. I told them about the car at the grocery store that Barry had left and gave as much information as I could. I later found out that the car Barry used to get to the store parking lot was still there and came back as stolen. I'm not sure if Barry and those other guys were ever found, I know that. I'm just really glad that I had the spare key with me and was able to get away from them, otherwise who knows what could have happened to me. In this true creepy story, you'll hear why it is a bad idea to give someone your home address to pick up a simple little household item. This creepy Craigslist experience took place about 5 years ago. My son was just turning 2, and we had a stroller that was barely used and he had outgrown. It was a very nice stroller, and I thought that instead of just getting rid of it, I could try to sell it on Craigslist and make a few bucks. I put it on Craigslist for $50 and was hoping it would sell quickly. A few days went by, and I finally got an email from somebody interested in buying it. The email was pretty short. It just said, "Is the stroller still for sale?" And it was signed Richard. I responded to him and told him that it was still available, and if he was interested in it, I was available. The next day I sent the message, and not even 5 minutes later, I got a response back. Richard said that he wanted to buy the stroller and asked if he could come over that evening to pick it up. I wasn't doing anything that evening, and I said yes. He then asked me for my address, and I gave it to him. I asked what time he would be coming by, and he said around 6 p.m. I agreed, and then waited for him to come by. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, so I didn't have much to do during the day. I remember cleaning up the house a bit and making sure the stroller was ready for Richard. 6 o'clock came, and I was waiting for him at around 6:05 p.m. I got an email from Richard saying that he was running a little bit late and that he would be there in about 20 minutes. This wasn't really a big deal to me, and I was fine with waiting a bit longer. I responded to him and said okay. He then emailed me back again and said thanks, and that he really wanted the stroller. About 30 minutes later, Richard had still not shown up. I was starting to get a little bit annoyed. I emailed him back and asked him if he was still planning on coming. He responded to me about 10 minutes later and said yes, he was just running behind and asked if he could come by at 7. I thought this was kind of weird because he had said he would be there at 6 and now 7, but I decided to let him come by at 7 because I wasn't doing anything else that night. After waiting until 7 o'clock, Richard didn't show up again. I emailed him and asked him where he was this time. He didn't respond at all. I got frustrated and decided to email him one last time and told him if he wasn't there by 7:30, I was going to sell the stroller to somebody else. I also asked him to call me if he was still interested in the stroller. I included my phone number in the email and hit send. By 7:30, I hadn't heard anything from Richard and was now really annoyed. I decided to call it a night and forget about the stroller. I planned on maybe putting it back on Craigslist the next day. I made dinner and watched TV and then went to bed. The next day I woke up early and went online to check my email. I saw that I had several emails from Richard that were sent overnight. The first one was sent around 11 p.m. He apologized for not showing up and said that he would come by the next day. The next email was sent around 1 a.m. and he said he really wanted the stroller and would be there in the morning to get it. After that, there were 3 more emails all sent within the next hour. They all basically said that he was coming over in the morning to get the stroller and asked if I was home. At that point, I was no longer interested in selling the stroller to him anymore. I found his emails to be very strange and off-putting. I didn't respond to him at all and decided to just ignore it. I thought about emailing him back and telling him that the stroller was no longer available, but I didn't. I got my son ready and planned on running some errands that day. When I was just about ready to leave the house, I saw a car pull up in my driveway. I was in my living room and I looked out the window and saw a man get out. He was about 50 years old with black hair and glasses. He was wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. I watched him walk up to my front door and ring the doorbell. I didn't want to answer it because I knew it had to be Richard. He rang the doorbell again, and after waiting a minute, he knocked on the door. He then stepped back and looked around my yard. I watched him from my living room window and saw him go around the side of my house. This really creeped me out, and I was not sure what to do. I thought about calling the police, but decided to wait and see what he would do. He then walked back to the front of my house and knocked on the door again. After a minute, he turned around and walked back to his car. I was relieved when he finally got back in his car and left, but then about 5 minutes later, he came back and parked in my driveway again. He didn't get out this time, and I saw him sitting in his car. He was looking at my house and I got really scared. I didn't know what this guy wanted, and I was worried that he might try to break in. I decided to call the police and told them that a man was sitting in my driveway and that I didn't know who he was. I gave them his description and the description of his car. They told me that they would send an officer to check it out. While I was on the phone with the police, Richard got out of his car again and walked up to my door. He knocked again, and I told the police that he was now at my door. They told me to stay on the phone and wait for the officer to arrive. After a couple of minutes, Richard walked back to his car and drove away. I was still on the phone with the police, and they said that they would send an officer to my house. Anyway, when the police arrived, I told them what had happened and showed them the emails from Richard. They took a report and said that they would try to find out who he was. I never heard anything back from the police, and I never saw Richard again. I ended up selling the stroller to somebody else a couple of weeks later, and I never had any other issues. This experience made me very cautious about using Craigslist, and I haven't used it much since then. It was really scary to have somebody come to my house like that, and I still get nervous when I think about it. Did I just acquire the creepiest roommate ever? This story is a written documentary of my friend's last words before he unexpectedly disappeared. A few months back, I finally moved out of my parents' place. I didn't have a lot of money saved up, so I could only get a place in the sketchy part of town. But fortunately, the building my apartment was in seemed like the safest place in that part of town I had to move to. I absolutely refused to go back to my parents. Everything was fine, except the rent was pretty high for my budget. So in order to offset the costs of living, I decided to put out an ad for a roommate on all the places I could think of, and finally got a hit on Craigslist. Now that I think of it, that right there should have been red flag number 1. So I found a roommate. His name was Jackson, and he seemed like an alright dude. There was, however, about 2 years of age difference between us, him being 25 and me being 23. I know I should have moved out a long time ago, but that's another story. Everything was okay for a few months. He had a job that kept him busy, and we would hardly see each other during the week. Anyways, he seemed to have most weekends off, so according to him it was a decent job. At least he never complained about it. So on the weekends we would go and get something to eat, hang out at places, or just eat at home. This is where my problem started with him. For some unknown reason, he never picked up after himself, which got on my nerves after a while. He'd leave his trash by the front door, never taking it out. It became so bad that it sometimes got to the point that whatever was in the bag would start to rot and smell the apartment up like a pig pen. I really don't know why I never just picked the bags up myself. I suppose it is just the principle of things. Now that I think about it, I should have checked what was in the bags, because that smell wasn't normal at all. He'd leave his dishes in the sink, and whenever I washed them, the water would turn a murky brown color. These were all only knives and sharp objects. Why didn't I notice that before? Anyways, I got to a point where I just refused to wash them because it was just disgusting. and he should be able to clean up after himself. Whenever I brought it up to him, he'd get angry and storm into his room, muttering something about getting caught by the police. I just brushed it off like he was crazy, which is probably true. In hindsight, this made me afraid to bring it up to him. I was still fine with him being in the apartment as he was on the lease with me. I didn't really have a choice but to be okay with it, because financially I don't know if I could make it alone. Another one of his weird things, he never wanted to watch the news. If we were watching TV and the news came on, he would either turn the TV off or change the channel when I wasn't around. Maybe he's got PTSD, and that stuff might trigger him. I don't know. It definitely doesn't sit right with me, though maybe I'm overreacting. I'm not really sure what to make of this situation. When we go out in public, he's always wearing a mask and sunglasses, as if he's afraid to be seen. He never wants to go to places with a lot of people. He would rather stay at home. I'm a homebody to an extent, but even I like to go out. Sometimes I really don't get it. I started assessing the situation, and it sucks I got this kind of roommate, but maybe it's worse than that. Maybe he's like a murderer or something. I doubt that's the case. I would think I could see the signs. Maybe he is. I mean, it all lines up. I'm probably just overreacting though, right? Yeah, I'm overreacting. I just can't get over the thought. I don't know what to do. Another thing that's weird, he spends hours in the basement of the apartment complex. I've asked the owner of the building if he's okay with this, and he seemed to have no problem at all. He seemed nervous when I asked though. He said that he heard some commotion in the alleyway by the apartment, and when he went to check it out, he saw my roommate hurting someone. He said he got away without my roommate seeing him, but he's still scared that my roommate might have possibly seen him. Jackson, my roommate, had asked my landlord for the keys to the basement. Not wanting to get hurt, he gave them to him. I want to investigate, but I don't want to risk it. What if I get caught? Or what if, because of my paranoia, an innocent person dies in the basement? I would rather just not attempt it. I don't know what to do. I'm scared that he'll find out I'm following his moves. I wish I could just kick him out, but the manager of the apartment seems scared of him, and by what he said, for good reason, I think I should be too. I just don't know what to do. I'm afraid that he's done something bad and is going to do something bad again. Should I go to the police about this? What if they find something? Or worse, they don't. And I'm just crazy and the one that falsely accused his roommate of murder. What happens then? I've been watching the news closely for a story about a murderer or a missing person, but nothing. I think I'm going to confront him. If I don't give you an update, I'm dead. I really hope I'm just paranoid. Oh God, he's here. He's unlocking the door to the apartment. I have to go. These may well be my last words. If they are, I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I was such a bad son. I love you. Goodbye. Hopefully not forever. After listening to this creepy Craigslist tale, it will give any young lady chills down their spine. A few months ago, I was bored at work one day. When I didn't have as much to do, I would just go on my phone or browse the internet on my computer. Sometimes I go on Craigslist and look at cars or other things for sale just for fun. One day I had about an hour until I got off work and everything was slow. I went on Craigslist and then noticed the misconnection section. I clicked on it just for fun, because I thought it might be amusing to read. This is a section on Craigslist where people will post about if they saw somebody and maybe had a conversation with them in public or something. If they didn't get the person's name or any information, they'll reach out and ask them to contact them. That's why it's called misconnections. And it seemed kind of weird to me. I clicked on a few and read them. On the fourth, or maybe the fifth one that I saw, it seemed like the person was writing about me. The ad said blonde female in and then mentioned the name of the city that I live and work in. When I clicked on the ad, it said, I saw you walking on your street last Thursday night, saw you again at Target the next day wearing a Braves hat. Let me know if I can come over sometime. This really shocked me because not only had I gone for a walk in my neighborhood Thursday night, but I had been at the Target as well, and I was wearing a Braves hat at Target. It made me a little bit suspicious. The fact that the person had seen me in two different places made me wonder if they were stalking me. That's what was going through my head immediately. But maybe it was just somebody who lived in my neighborhood, and it was a coincidence. They were definitely describing me, I knew that for a fact. But I decided not to answer the ID. I finished work for the day and then went home. I lived by myself in a smaller house on a fairly busy street. One of my best friends, Avery, came over after work. We would hang out quite a bit. After she came over, I told her about the Craigslist post. I decided to show it to her. So I got my laptop and logged on. When I got to the misconnections part of Craigslist, I saw that there was now a new posting. The title said, "Blonde Woman In," and then mentioned my city again, part 2. I clicked on it and read the advertisement. It said, "You didn't respond to my first ad." I guess you didn't see it. Blonde girl walking your street Thursday night. Braves hat on in Target Friday. Let me know if I can come over. You live on my street and in a big house with your blue Toyota in the driveway. I could feel my heart rate increasing, and I suddenly felt really nervous and scared. It was now obvious that whoever this person was, they knew where I lived, and I must have seen them at least twice, and maybe not realized it. It didn't seem like a coincidence. I then got scared that maybe somebody was watching my house, and I asked Avery to check outside to see if there was anybody there. She got up and walked out to the living room and looked outside from a window but didn't see anyone. She then asked me if I knew any creepy guys or if there was anyone who might want to do this to me. I told her no, and we both thought it was probably best that I called the police. I then picked up my phone and dialed 911. When I told the police about it, they said that they would send over an officer to my house to check on things. I waited and eventually the officer showed up. I showed him the ad and told them everything that had happened. I asked him if he would look around my house outside because I was too scared to do it myself. He agreed and went outside. While he was gone, Avery and I waited in the kitchen and talked about the whole situation. After a couple of minutes, we heard a noise from the side of the house. It was something tapping the side of the house. And it was from the side where we didn't have any windows. I looked over at Avery and we were both scared. I walked into the living room to see if I could look out the front window. But before I could get there, I heard a loud bang on the front door. I froze in my tracks and then turned back to Avery. She told me to just wait because the police officer would be back soon. As she was talking, I saw him walk back in from the other side of the house. The officer walked to the front door and opened it quickly. I could see that he looked around but didn't see anybody. After this, he came back inside and told me that he saw nobody around. He then told us that he would stay close by in the area for a while, and suggested I stay inside with the doors locked. It was good to have the police there, but after they left, I was still really scared. I stayed with Avery for the rest of the night, and we were both on edge. I had to work the next morning, and when I got to work, I checked Craigslist again. I saw yet another posting, this time saying "Blonde Woman at Home." Third time's the charm. I felt like it was only getting worse. And whoever this person was, they were not going to stop. I tried to keep myself together and think of what to do next. I didn't respond to any of the posts. And after work, I was pretty much planning on going straight to the police station to talk to them in person. I was scared that somebody might be following me. I made it through the day and did my best to act normally. When I got back home, Avery had actually stopped by already and was waiting for me inside. She offered to drive me to the police station, and I was glad to have her around. We then left and went straight to the police station. I met with an officer, and they took my report. I showed them the ads and explained everything that had happened. They told me that they would do everything they could to find the person responsible and help keep me safe. I then drove back home and hoped that things would get better. I kept checking Craigslist for any new posts, and the good news is that I didn't see any new ones. After the police took my report, nothing more seemed to happen. Maybe they were able to find the person or scared them off, but I'm not sure. I never got any answers or heard anything from the police about it. I still sometimes wonder who it was and what they were trying to do. Running into my ex-boyfriend at the grocery store was the last thing I wanted, but what followed was a terrifying reminder of why I left him in the first place. Just a normal day, I decided to run to the store because I was low on groceries. I grabbed my list, jumped in the car, and listened to some nice tunes on the way. I went inside and started around the produce section to find some fresh greens. As I was fingering through the wilted ones, I was startled to death with an older woman tapping me on the shoulder. I screamed from being frightened. I then apologized for yelling out like that. She grabbed my hand and said, "It's okay, dear, but I came over to ask you if you knew that man over there in the corner. He keeps staring at you with a perplexing demeanor." I slowly turned around and saw my ex-boyfriend Ronnie standing behind the display of shirts. He wasn't moving, just staring at me. My blood ran ice cold. Ronnie was a terrible boyfriend. He screamed at me all the time and erupted with anger whenever he saw me talking to another man. Things got so bad between us that one night I just packed up and left without saying goodbye. Ronnie was the reason I left this town in the first place. I was worried that I'd see him again when I came back, but I didn't expect to see him staring at me across a huge store. Would you like me to call security? The woman asked. I told her not to worry. I knew he was probably just shocked to see me. We had broken up so long ago. He was probably just going to leave me alone. But he didn't. He started following me throughout the store. I went to the shoe section, then the electronics, then the books. Wherever I went, he kept pace. He made sure not to get too close because he didn't want the workers to get suspicious of him. But he wasn't even trying to hide. I was starting to get really scared. He then walked over and arrogantly asked me if I missed him, and I told him of course not. Then his smile melted away with a sinister look. I then turned and ran to the exit. I made it to the exit and past the automatic doors. I ran outside and tried to get to my car. Ronnie kept coming. Now that we were in the parking lot, he broke out into a full sprint. He caught up to me within seconds and grabbed my shoulder. Please, babe, he said. I just want to talk. I didn't want to talk to him. I wanted to run. But I knew he would catch me. He pulled me around to face him and smiled that stupid grin. He always used to make me feel safe. I was terrified. Why did you leave me? He asked. I miss you so much. His voice was quiet and desperate. I could tell he wasn't going to let me go until I answered him. I didn't know what to say. I needed to find myself. I stammered. I wasn't happy. His smile grew wider. You were happy. I know you were. He tightened his grip on my shoulder. You just forgot how much you love me. Ronnie, I don't love you anymore. I said, please let me go. His smile turned into a scowl. Let you go, he repeated. Let you go? He pushed me into the side of a nearby van. I can't let you go. You don't need me? Ronnie asked. Ronnie then leaned in closer. I could smell his breath. You're coming with me, he whispered. Whether you like it or not. I tried to push him away, but he was too strong. He grabbed my wrist and started pulling me toward his car. I screamed for help, but no one was around. Then I remembered the pepper spray in my purse. I reached for it and sprayed him in the face. He screamed and let go of me to rub his eyes. I ran to my car and jumped in and locked the doors. I watched him through the window as he stumbled around, still screaming. Then I started the engine and drove away as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was miles away. I pulled over and called the police, telling them everything. They told me to come to the station and file a report. I haven't seen Ronnie and he disappeared ever since, but I know he's still out there somewhere looking for me. The thought just completely haunts me. This terrifying tale all begins when independence looks so good, but reality bites much harder. My name is Maya. I'm 25 years old, living in the city with my boyfriend Kevin. Honestly, things have been tough lately. Kevin lost his job a few months ago, and money has been really tight. We had been staying with my parents for a while to get back on our feet, but you know how it is living with parents as an adult. It just starts to weigh on you after a while. You feel like you've lost your independence. Kevin was going stir crazy just sitting around the house all day. Actually, we both were. So when we saw this suspiciously cheap apartment listing on Craigslist, it seemed too good to be true. But Kevin was desperate to get us out of my parents' place. I'll admit, I kind of loved the idea of having our own little nest again, a fresh start. Despite the little voice of doubt in the back of my mind, we took it. In hindsight, I should have listened to that voice. It all started out pretty mundane and normal at first. The apartment was nothing fancy, just a basic one-bedroom in an older building on the rougher side of town, but it was clean. The landlord seemed nice enough. And hey, we could actually afford it. Those first few days we were just relieved to be out on our own again. We went to the grocery store, cooked dinners together, and binge-watched some shows on Netflix in the evenings. All that simple blessing of normalcy we had been craving finally came to fruition. Then the petty disagreements about leaving dishes in the sink, or whose turn it was to take out the trash, began. I missed those silly arguments when things started to go wrong. But then all the hair-raising events began around the fourth or fifth night. I woke up sometime after 11 p.m. to use the bathroom. As I was coming out, I heard the most terrifying sound of a woman screaming. No, screaming doesn't even describe it properly. It was this blood-curdling, ripping shriek of pure fear and agony. It made my blood run cold. I shook Kevin awake in a panic. Did you hear that? Someone's in trouble? We have to call the police, I said. He tried to calm me down, saying it was probably just a TV or something from another apartment. But I knew what I heard. It wasn't normal. Right then there was frantic knocking at our door, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Kevin motioned for me to stay back as he carefully went over and opened it a crack. It was our landlord, Mr. Carl. He had this disturbingly casual smile on his face as he said no need for alarm, folks. Just a little disagreement between a couple of tenants. But it's being taken care of, so no need to call the authorities, okay? The way he said it with such a total lack of concern was so bizarrely off-putting, almost like he was amused by the whole thing. I shivered despite the warm night. If you're sure, Mr. Carl, Kevin said uneasily. We'd still hate to be a bother. Can we call if anything else comes up? Oh, there's no bother at all. But please, if you do happen to see or hear anything unsettling, don't go calling the cops, please. That never ends well for anyone, Mr. Carl chuckled as if he just told a hilarious joke. You two seem like such a nice, smart young couple. Why don't you just give me a ring directly if any future unpleasantness arises? I'll get it sorted out. He gave an overconfident wink, then without another word turned and headed back down the dingy hallway whistling some eerily cheery tune. The look Kevin and I exchanged in the wake of that supremely unsettling encounter said it all. We both knew deep down that something was deeply wrong here with Kozak, with this whole place. But what choice did we have? We were broke and hadn't even unpacked all our things yet, so we tried our best to just ignore it. Chalk it up to the landlord being some eccentric old man and hope things didn't get any weirder. Oh, how I wish I could go back to the naive mindset of those first few nights, unburdened by the sickening realizations that were still to come. It started with the small things at first, like hearing strange noises in the night. Not just screams this time, but occasional muffled thumps and the sounds of people frantically running up and down the halls, always at the most unholy hours between midnight and 4 a.m. Whenever I brought it up to Kevin, he got this glazed, half-asleep look in his eyes and denied hearing anything out of the ordinary. Part of me wondered if he was just trying to reassure me to cling to some sense of normalcy in our new home. Another part of me knew he heard those noises too, and was just as terrified as I was. Then more bizarre events started occurring. Strangers would randomly knock at our door at all hours, just dazed-looking men reeking of booze or worse. Me, Carl said it would be okay. This is where I'm supposed to go. We stuck to the cardinal rule of never opening the door to those sketchy individuals. But the implications of what they were showing up for made my blood run cold. Kevin and I didn't even want to voice our darkest suspicions out loud. Despite the escalating weirdness, we both felt so trapped. Neither of us had jobs at that point, and we had blown what little savings we had on the move and security deposit. Where the hell else could we go? Then came the night that fully shattered any remaining illusions. The night that pushed us past the breaking point. I woke up around 2 a.m. to Kevin tossing and turning, mumbling incoherently in his sleep. I tried to gently shake him awake, growing more frantic as he wouldn't wake up. Finally, his eyes flashed open wild and unfocused. He looked right through me with zero recognition. Kevin, babe, what's wrong? You were having a nightmare. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a young woman crying, sobbing in pure, hopeless despair. It seemed to be coming from the apartment next door. My heart stopped as I realized whatever nightmare had been plaguing Kevin, he likely heard those cries too. We had the same horrific implications about what they meant. I wanted so badly to run out of there, pound on that door, but I'd seen enough crime documentaries to know that's exactly how young women end up dead. So we just sat there petrified, listening to those tormented wails that went on forever. Eventually, they trailed off into a deathly silence, even more chilling. I knew deep down we couldn't spend another night in this waking nightmare. Not after that. The next morning, we packed up as quickly and quietly as humanly possible. I didn't even care about getting the security deposit back at that point. Nothing was worth sticking around that hellhole a second longer. As we were dragging our meager belongings out to the cab, Mr. Carl emerged from the shadows and flashed that same sickening grin. Leaving so soon? I do hope every accommodation was to your liking during your stay, he said, letting out this wheezy chuckle that made my skin crawl. Kevin urged me past without a word or eye contact. We never looked back. So there you have it. We got out, but so many mysteries remain. Just what kind of unspeakable depravities were happening behind those paper-thin walls? Who were those poor souls we heard screaming and crying out so desperately? And most of all, what did Mr. Carl mean by accommodation? Was he implying we were somehow complicit by our silence? By witnessing those horrors and doing nothing? I try not to dwell on it, but those questions still haunt me. If only we'd had the resources to go somewhere else right away. If only we'd found the courage to report Kozak no matter how ominous his warnings, If only in the end, I suppose we'll never know the full truth. But one thing's for certain from now on, we're never taking too good to be true apartment listings on Craigslist ever again. Some horrors are better left undiscovered. This terrifying tale started with moving to a new town for a teaching job. It seemed like a fresh start until a Craigslist rental offer led me to witness something absolutely horrific. My name is Evan. Last year I got a new teaching job in Asheville, North Carolina. I had never been there before, but the job was perfect, and I couldn't say no. I instantly accepted the offer. I had to find an apartment within my price range. But I was shocked at how expensive Asheville was. The rent was more than double what I could even afford. I looked all over but couldn't find anything reasonable. While I was staying in a pretty gross hotel in Nashville, someone suggested I looked for places on Craigslist. I had never used Craigslist before, and always thought it was a bit sketchy, but I was desperate. So I went to the rental listings and found a guy named Andy who wanted to rent out a room in his condo. I didn't like the idea of sharing a bathroom and kitchen with someone I had never met. But the address was literally down the street from my new job. I emailed him to tell him I was interested. We exchanged some messages and eventually agreed to a Zoom meeting so we could see if we were compatible. When I saw his face on my computer screen, I was instantly relieved. He seemed like such a nice, honest guy. He answered all my questions and gave me a really good first impression. During our meeting, he was sitting at his table with the kitchen counter just behind him. I couldn't see a lot of the house, but what I did see looked nice. I asked if he could move his laptop around and give me a virtual tour of the place. But he said he wanted to clean up a little first. He told me this meeting was just to figure out if we were personally compatible. That should have been a red flag for me, but I trusted him. I was about to end the call when I noticed something moving on the floor behind him. It was a little black lump. I leaned closer to my computer to get a better look. And he noticed my expression because he spun around in his chair. Instantly, he jumped up and ran into the kitchen. By then, I could see more of the black lump. It looked like someone's head covered in a garbage bag. It was some poor guy wrapped in a bag, and he wasn't dead. I couldn't see most of him because the kitchen counter was in the way, but I could still see him moving on the floor. Andy got up and ran towards him and started kicking his head until the body was once again hidden behind the counter. He stood there for a second looking down. I think he was waiting for the body to stop moving. Then he casually walked back to his computer screen. I was so focused on what I had just seen that I completely forgot I was still on Zoom. He could still see me. He looked right into my eyes, his face turned weirdly blank. So you saw that he said he sounded like I had just caught him jaywalking or something. I didn't move. Yeah, I figured, he said. Then he ended the Zoom call. I don't know how long I sat there completely frozen processing what had just happened. 1 second. I was having a friendly chat with this nice normal guy. The next, I was watching a possible murder or kidnapping. It didn't feel real. Realization started to set in. I was in danger. I was a witness and Andy would come for me. I couldn't imagine what he was capable of. I had to figure out if he could track me down. Thankfully, Craigslist uses temporary email accounts to protect its clients. So Andy didn't have my email. We had never exchanged phone numbers or shared our last names, so he didn't have those either. All he had was my Zoom address. Was that enough to find me? Maybe, but it would take him a while. Even if he had all my contact information, he didn't know my hotel room. I'd be safe for now. All I had to do was call the police and tell them everything. I reached for my phone and dialed 911. I told the dispatcher everything. It took a while because I wanted to include every detail while it was fresh in my brain. I knew they would record those calls for later. Then I told her I was driving straight to the station and hung up. I went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. I think I was still in shock at least a little bit. That seemed to help. Then I grabbed my keys and left when I opened the hotel door, and he was waiting on the other side. In the time it took me to talk to the police, he had driven across the street and found me. I felt so stupid for not going to the police station immediately. He shoved me backwards and walked inside before I could stop him. This man is a killer, and he's now in my hotel. I immediately started screaming, and he turns and locks the door. As he stares at me, he closes the blinds, then the curtains. I looked towards the bathroom, and I saw a huge tarp laying on the floor. Is that for me? I thought to myself. Am I going to end up like that man I saw on the Zoom call? I then decided it's life or death time, and I'm not running. He walked up to me with his head down, but his eyes locked on me as I'm still screaming. Next, he lunged at me and pinned my arms onto the hotel bed. As I'm screaming and crying, I hear someone knocking and yelling at the hotel door. Andy became distracted and looked towards the hotel door L that gave me just enough opportunity for me to kick him with all my might right into his little boys. He then fell over and I ran to the door and unlocked, where two grown men ran into the room to subdue Andy. Next, the cops came and arrested Andy. Later, the police investigated Andy's condo and found a missing persons tied up and beaten badly. Apparently, he used Craigslist to lure people into his condo, and then he did unthinkable things to them. Grateful to be alive. What would you do if you found a hidden compartment in your new car filled with chilling secrets that suggest the previous owner was a hideous monster? Well, get ready, because we are about to dive into this terrifying tale. I'm Martin, but some folks call me Hope. I'm 34 and a software developer living in Seattle. Recently, I've been going through a tough time. My girlfriend Jen and I broke up 6 months ago after being together for 5 years. It was messy, and I'm still not over it. I decided to move and get a fresh start, which included selling my car because it held too many memories of Jen and me. I found a decent deal on Craigslist for a 2015 Honda Civic. I decided to pursue it, but I had no idea that buying this car would turn my life into a living nightmare. When I met the seller to check out the car, everything seemed normal. The seller Bill was a middle-aged guy who was very friendly. He said he was upgrading to a newer model. The car looked good, no major dents or scratches. I then took it for a test drive and everything seemed fine. We finalized the paperwork for $8,500 and I drove my new Civic back to my apartment. I was super pumped. A few days later, I decided to clean the interior. That's when I made a disturbing discovery. Underneath the backseat cushions, I found a hidden compartment. It was a small door carved into the trunk area, leading to a tiny, enclosed space between the rear seats and the trunk. I couldn't understand why a regular car would have something like this, unless it was for a more sinister purpose. When I looked inside the cramped compartment, I felt sick. It smelled of stale sweat and possibly something even more disturbing. Shining my phone's light inside, I saw streaks of dried brown liquid that looked like blood. Feeling nauseous, I quickly closed the compartment and stepped back overwhelmed with dread. What terrible things had the previous owner done with this vehicle? Had he used the secret room to transport victims he had harmed or killed? The questions swirled in my mind, each more horrifying than the last. I realized I was now connected to something deeply disturbing and possibly criminal. Part of me wanted to go straight to the authorities to report my finding and put as much distance as possible between me and whatever depravity this vehicle had witnessed. But another part of me, influenced by crime shows and horror movies, worried that coming forward might make me a person of interest, even a suspect. So I did nothing for the time being. I tried my best to go about my daily life and not think about the ominous secret compartment. But how could I not? Every time I opened the trunk or slid into the driver's seat, I was assaulted by phantom smells and visions of unimaginable horrors. The subtle stain of dread resurfaced, leaving me uneasy and tormented by morbid hypothetical, restless nights which were punctuated by vivid nightmares, visions of being trapped in that cramped, sweaty compartment, banging hopelessly on the door, gulping stale air as my cries for help went unanswered. Other times I dreamt I was Bill, a mild-mannered monster calmly shuttling my unspeakable cargo to its grim destination. Awake, I began noticing small details about the vehicle that had previously escaped me. A splotch of reddish-brown discoloration in the trunk lining, strange symbols etched into the underside of the dashboard, and the faint acrid scent of chemicals lingering in the cabin's recirculated air. Each observation fed the cycle of dread and fueled my imagination to even darker places. After a week of inner torment, I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. I would remove the wretched compartment, scrub the vehicle clean of any lingering remnants of its prior purpose, and be done with it once and for all. Armed with a toolkit and a bucket of industrial cleaner, I set about dismantling the hidden room. As I carefully pried away its flimsy wooden panels, I knew my plan was doomed to fail. Tucked amid the sickly beige upholstery was a small cardboard box. Its contents promised to further unravel what remained of my sanity. Inside, I found handwritten notes scrawled in what seemed to be chicken scratch. Pages and pages of rambling, half-coherent screeds vacillated between records of apparent daily minutiae and grandiose proclamations about bearing witness to an ethical truth. Certain chilling phrases leapt off the page. They're everywhere, hiding in plain sight, horrible, unblinking eyes peering through the veil at all times. Can't let them steal my essence, not after coming this far. Another page decorated with strange symbols reminiscent of those on the dashboard. Where at the time of transformation draws near, the offering prepares the vessel to shrug off its withered husk and be remade anew, incorruptible and eternal. As I read on slack-jawed in disbelief, it became clear these were no ordinary unhinged ramblings. Something larger and far more insidious bound them together. As I sit here clutching those cryptic pages, part of me wants nothing more than to shove them back into the shadows and return to blissful ignorance. To move on from this existential detour and find some semblance of normalcy again, pushing bile-inducing questions of cosmic dread from my mind. But another part, call it sickening curiosity or a deficit of self-preservation, feels inextricably drawn to unraveling this disturbing saga, even if the truth is too horrific to behold. For now, the mysterious compartment sits reopened in the car, almost daring me to keep pulling at its sickening threads. While part of me craves a return to blissful ignorance, another part can't resist the lure of the unknown. This last truly horrific story is about a routine service call that turned into an unfortunate death. My name is Jeff, and I'm a full-time service technician, and I also do side jobs to make extra money for vacations, big boy toys, or whatever tool I wanted. So for my part-time work, I posted ads on Craigslist describing what I can do and to call me if anything needs to be fixed. Basically, I'm just a do-it-all handyman. I've been doing this for years and never had a problem before. But of course, there is always one. So I get a call from a man named Mike, and he stated I did some work for a buddy of his, and it's nice to know of someone else's work before you have them come over. I recalled his friend's project, and it all sounded great, and we scheduled the work for a Saturday morning when I'm off my regular job. The job was to replace all the faucets in the house, which he already bought. I just had to remove the old ones and put the new ones in. Pretty routine stuff, at least I thought. Fixing a few faucets for a stranger seemed easy until I realized the iced tea he offered me might be more than just refreshment. It definitely looks like someone had broken the faucets on purpose. It looked like they had hit it with a wrench until the knobs fell off. This made me super suspicious. I looked at the cold iced tea in my hand and decided not to drink it. Something was just off, and I didn't trust Mike at all. Pretending to take a sip, I kept my lips shut. I asked Mike for a towel before I started working. While he went to get it, I poured the iced tea down the drain in the bathroom. When he returned with the towel, I acted like I had finished the drink. He smiled and told me to take my time. Then he left the room. Despite my fear, I wasn't entirely sure Mike had tried to poison me, so I focused on fixing all the faucets. While I was working, Mike came back into the kitchen. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I was going to take a nap. But I heard you moving." "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Don't worry about it," Mike replied. "I needed to get some groceries anyways. I'm headed out. If you finish early, feel free to use the kitchen and help yourself to any food you want." "Thanks," I said. Mike grabbed his keys and left. As soon as the front door closed, I felt relieved. I decided to skip lunch and get the job done quickly so I could leave. I started swapping out parts when I heard the front door open again. Mike was back and I felt uneasy again. He walked into the kitchen and stared at me. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Just finishing the job." I said, "Then I'll be out of your hair." "You didn't drink the iced tea, did you?" My heart raced. I knew I couldn't lie, but also couldn't tell the truth. "Actually, I did," I said. "It was delicious." "Do you think you could make me another one?" Mike froze. He knew something was up. I saw a flicker of panic on his face. "Sure," he said. "I'll get right on that." He went to the fridge, grabbed a pitcher, and poured me another glass. He handed it to me. "There you go," Mike said. "Thank you," I replied. "This looks even better than the last one." "Glad you think so," Mike said. I took a big sip, pretending to enjoy it. "Do you mind if I take a nap now?" he asked. "I think I left my watch in your bedroom." I said, "Would you mind if I go get it before you lay down?" He nodded and walked toward the door. I watched him go down the hallway. When he opened his door, I grabbed my phone and texted the police. Then I took another gulp of the lemonade and dropped my glass. The sound of the shattering glass made Mike spin around. He saw me clutching my chest and gasping for air. "I think there was something in that drink," I said, collapsing on the floor. Mike ran toward me with panic on his face. "What happened?" he asked. "You poisoned me," I said. He got on his knees and checked my pulse. His eyes widening. He tried to talk to me, but I couldn't hear anything. The world was going black. The last thing I saw was Jonathan's terrified expression as the police stormed through the front door.